Welcome back. This week we're going to go with Kelly Galloup's Mini Dungeon. This is one of the patterns that I always have with me. For the longest time, it was only the regular size dungeon, the full size dungeon that I fished. And then, I started paying a little bit more attention, going with some of the smaller flies. This is an excellent Sculpin imitation. And there are times where the mini will outfish the full size, especially when you start getting into your brighter days, maybe into summer, fall, spring. It may be best bet on the full size dungeon. Some of your smaller creeks, spring creeks, whatever it may be, the mini's probably the way to go. But like I said, there are times where this will absolutely outfish just about any fly out there. And when I have really tough days going, I'll turn to this mini, and it produces almost all the time. The motion that you get out of this, the tail whip from such a small fly, it really is just a phenomenal pattern. So we'll get into this one. We're going to tie it in tan today. We're going to go through this relatively quick. We're going to highlight some different camera angles on this one, get a little bit more detail as always, and just retouch on a pattern that we did before. But to start, on the back side, we got an MFC 7050 size 6 and gel spun 100. So we're going to get our thread down. There's the black dog coming in to make an appearance. We're going to get our thread down here, take it back to the ascent of the hook, and then just make a nice thread base right here. And then we're going to go into a cream Marabou for the first section of our tail. And we're going to take this and just get the section that we want right there, just the tips of it, make sure everything's nice and lined up. Not real bulky on this either. You don't want a ton of bulk because this is a smaller pattern, smaller hook obviously. You don't need a ton of bulk, and it's going to fill this out, and it actually seems like the less that you use on this, the more tail whip you get. So don't take a ton of bulk on this. You can see how much I'm using right there. Just with it being damp and everything, it's a pretty good reference to what we're going to be using. And then we're just going to secure this in place. Take this back to the ascent of the hook, or the ascent of the barb. I'm going to make one wrap underneath there just to secure this a little bit more. And we're going to take this up to the front. Close to it, we're going to leave a little bit of room for our overwings on that. And go ahead and just secure all of this in place. Work your way to the back, and then we're going to take 2 strands. You could get away with 1 strand on this if you wanted. I like a little bit extra flash in it, so we're going to take the 2 on this. We're going to take the 2 strands and double them up. Just like so. I'll wet these a little bit because it makes it a little bit easier to work with when they're sticking together for you. Measure that out just short of the length of the tail, and we're going to run these laterally. The 4 on my side, 4 on the camera side, or opposite of the camera depending on where I'm editing this one. And there we go. We've got some internal flash in our tail. Now we're going to do a toner over the top, and there are quite a few options on this actually. I'm missing the Bugaboo patch from Whiting. It's a phenomenal product. I'm out of it right now, but it has essentially replaced this Grizzly Marabou, or what used to be the Chickaboo. This stuff, I love the natural barring to it, the color. Everything really looks great with this. The problem that you run into is for this application, using tails and overwings, in this pack you may get 5 feathers that'll work on a fly. And you'll see we'll go through, we'll need all of that because we're going to go with the one toner in the back here. We're going to go one for the overwing, one for the skirt, and then one for another overwing on the front hackle. So what I have moved to most recently is this barred Marabou from MFC. Here's the blood quill, which is what we're going to use today. It's the tan and brown mix. And then you've got the minis. These are awesome. These things are great. They have they're just 2-inch Marabou plumes, and the consistency in them is unreal. It is just something that you cannot duplicate as far as consistency goes anywhere else. These are a little bit longer. It would be more so for an application for like a full-size dungeon, but we'll make them work for the mini. Typically, if I were going minis, I'm going to go with these mini with the actual mini barred Marabou. But once again, don't have it in this color, so we're going to go with the blood quill. So we're just going to take some of these out of the pack, set these off to the side. You still need to do a little bit of sorting with these. Some of them are going to be a little bulkier than others, and you'll want to tailor them to the application that you're using. So like I said before, on the tail, this is the section that we're going to use right here. You can see that's all the more that I want on this. I don't want any of that extra bulk getting in there. One, it's gonna overtake your tail, and like I said, you get a little bit less tail whip in it. And two, it makes it a little bit more difficult to secure to the hook if you go getting just a big glob of feathers on there. So you want this running directly over the top. Set that in place. See how we got it. I have it going just slightly longer than the cream that we have underneath there, as you can see. And then before I advance forward on this, I'm going to take some medium gold wire and I'm going to tie this in. This is going to act as this is going to be our rib to counter wrap the hackle with. I'm going to set this in place. Probably got that a little bit long for what I want on this. And then I'm going to loop this back around. That way it doesn't pull out when I'm counter wrapping everything. Get that secure for now. And then form a quick dubbing loop here. Take it all the way back to where the Marabou tail starts, and then you can go forward building this bulk. Let me grab that tool right there. You can go forward building this bulk on the body for this with the Marabou. So then we'll trim that out. Get that in place. I'm going to bring this forward now, and I'm going to stop. You'll see I got probably 1/4 inch right here in front of the eye of the hook. I'm going to be putting in some hackle. I'm going to put in some overwings on this, so I want to leave myself a little bit of room so I'm not crowding the eye too awful much. Next thing up on this is for the body. We're just going to go with some ice dub. This is UV10. Get a little bit of this out of the package. This is getting down to the end of this one here. And I just want to form a slight taper on this. So we're going to get this in place here. You don't need a ton of this. It's going to fill your body up pretty quick. And like I said, you don't need a lot of this. You can see what we're working with right here. Let me get these out of the way. It's a little distracting. What we're working with right there, it's a little bit tighter at the front. I have it a little bit more loose at the bottom, and that's just going to help me form a taper as I go through this. So then just take that right to the front, still leaving that 1/4 inch right there to work with to tie in the other material that we're going to be putting in. Now we'll take that and get our wire loose here. And then what we're going to use for our hackle on this one is this is just a barred ginger. You can see what we're looking at right here. We've got just some browns, some creams, some blacks, a little bit of mix of everything. I really like the way that this color works with this tan. So what I'm going to do is just select a feather here, something on the smaller side, and I'm just going to gauge this. You can see it's going to give me about what I want right there. If you're a little bit longer, that's fine, but don't go getting too out of control on this one, and you just have a big, you wind up with too much hackle on the back, and it overtakes the fly just slightly. So keep these on the shorter side on this back one, because like I said, we are tying on a size 6, so it's pretty easy to select a hackle that is a little bit too big for this application. On the full size one, it's Sculpin that we use. You go trying to use Sculpin, it's too big. It really is. It's too, the fibers are too long. It's a little too webby. The neck hackle on this one seems to be just about a perfect fit. So that's what I typically go with on these minis. So then once again, I'm going to make sure that my wire is out of the way. I'm going to grab this with the hackle pliers and make sure that this first wrap, let me get that, I'm just going to make sure that your hackle, your shiny side, is facing to the eye of the hook. And then all we're going to do is make nice consistent wraps all the way to the back. Let me get one more, there we go. And then we're going to counter wrap this with our gold wire. If you want to use copper, you want to use yellow, whatever it may be, that's entirely up to you. It doesn't really show through a ton, but if you want to change it up on the colors, gold's not an absolute necessity. Whatever color you decide to go with will be fine. You can see that it's very subtle. I mean, it does show up in there, but it's not obscene by any means. So then we're going to take this and trim off our wire. Get the tools out of the way here. Now I'm going to go back to a cream hackle. We're going to do this for our overwings. This is going to be just the underside. And I'm going to take a full hackle here. And same as I did before, I'm just going to take and pinch off that very top section. Oh, I got a piece that I missed here. I got to cut this. Oh, it came out. I had my tail end or my tag end still sitting in there. So I'm going to take this now and I'm going to lay this back. There we go. I'm going to lay this back to where the cream is going to go right to my tie-in point with the Marabou for the tail that I used. And then I'm just going to set this into place. And this is more so just a filler than anything. If you want, you can just go with just your barred Marabou if you want. You can use just the barred Marabou and that's going to be fine. But I found that it does seem a little bit sparse when you tie that in there. So this gives just a little bit more bulk to that overwing. And it acts as a little prop in a way. So now, as I'm going forward with this, I want more bulk in each overwing. So I'm going to go a little bit heavier on this overwing than I did on the tail. And then it's going to get bulkier as I go forward. So as you're selecting your fiber, or as you're selecting your feathers, sort through them and get the bulkier ones as you move forward on this. So now I want this one going back into the tail section. So I want to go back about halfway in this tail 1/4 to halfway back my tail is how far I want my toner. And then we're going to go 1, 2, secure that in place, and then get a couple more good wraps on top of that. And then just trim that out. Now we're good to go. You can see that section right there. We have a nice transition going right through here from our overwing into the tail section. You have that nice mottled look that you're after for a Sculpin. And then when you look on the underside, you have that nice cream body that the Sculpin have. Get a whip finish in here, and you can see we have plenty of room to whip finish, and we're not crowding the eye. Everything's nice and clean right through there. Let me get rid of that. Everything's nice and clean through here. There we go. Now what I want to do, that one roll on me just a little bit. I like that better. Now what I want to do is I'm going to grab the articulation wire, wherever I set that. Oh, there we go. Hiding under some Marabou. I'm going to grab the articulation wire, and we're just going to go with 1 bead on this one. Before I do that, just going to grab a tan marker and touch this up a little bit on the thread. I'll leave the bottom section white. It doesn't matter all that much. And you can omit this if you want, because you'll see in a minute we're going to go over top of it with a skirt. So it's not absolutely necessary to do that, but me being OCD as I am, I always wind up putting it on there. So there's our back section. Our back hook. Now we're going to go to a front, which is a size 4. Same thing, MFC 70/50. And we're going to get our lead eyes tied in here. I'm just going to build a thread base down on this one. Same thing, stopping at the ascent of the hook. You can see when I let the thread down, it's not falling down straight for me, but when I let that down, it's right at the ascent. That's your reference point for where you're going to stop this. Get back here. There we go. Now I want to tie in these lead eyes. These are just size small, yellow eyes. Let me get these out of the package there. When you do the majority of lead eyes, whether it's a full-size dungeon, the Boogeyman, Kitty, October, whatever it may be, you'll typically have your eyes sitting right about here. We're going to back these up slightly, and we're going to put the eyes back a little bit further. And the reason that we're going to do that is we're just making 1 wrap of deer hair in the front, and that's going to be the head. We're just going to spin 1 section of deer hair, and that'll be the head for this fly. We're not going to go behind the eyes because it is a mini version of the dungeon. We're not going to stack behind the eyes and then do a full spin in the front. The head will kind of overtake the fly a little bit. So we're going to space this out, and you'll see here how much hook that we're going to be working with for the head. Just get your eyes secured at first. Figure 8 around the eyes, and then we're going to bring these on the bottom. So you can see that's a little bit more distance than what we typically work with the full-size dungeons, or like I said, any other dumbbell set that we use. We're going to bring this back just a little bit, and because it's back a little bit, it's going to bring your center of balance back, but the deer hair counteracts that because it has a buoyancy to it, so it's going to counteract that a little bit. And my glue is just about shot. I'm at the very end of this one, and it's, yeah, glued to itself. So I just want to touch a zap right on top of these eyes. This thing's going to the trash. It's gelling up and everything. It's done. But just a little bit of zap on top of the eyes gives you a little bit more security. And then what I'm going to do is take a look from the front, make sure that they're setting how I want them. Everything's nice and even. Try not to get zap on your fingers. And then I'm just going to repeat the process that I used to secure them in place. Get a couple of good wraps. And then work our way to the back. Now we're going to tie in our back section. As always, make sure that your wires are running parallel to one another. They're not twisted within that eye. They're wanting to fight me a little bit there. There we go. Our wires are running nice and parallel. Still wanting to fight me a little bit. So, loose wraps. To start on this, nothing secure whatsoever. I can pull this how I want it through. With the gel spun, it's a little bit more slick than if you're using like an 8/0 or a waxed thread. So it's a little bit easier to manipulate. And then I keep this back section a little bit less than the width of the bead. If you go getting too long, this thing files up on itself. It winds up wrapping around the front hook, and it just gets a little frustrating. And I found that you get a lot more motion with a shorter gap in your wire right there. So now that we have everything how we want it, our wire's not kicked off to the side or anything. It's running back nice and perpendicular to our front hook. We have everything in place. I'm just going to take these wires up through and then double them over. I'm going to bring them back about halfway onto the working body that we have. Now you see where I doubled these wires over, there's a little bump right there. That's going to be my reference point as to where I'm going to be tying in my collar and rubber legs and overwings, what have you. Just as we had a reference point on the back hook, that's the reference point that I'm using for this right here. So I'm not going to have material going past that at all. Now we're going to build a skirt on this. So the plume that I used before is what I'm going to take on this one. And if you want to, you can go just straight. Once again, you can go just a straight overwing with the barred Marabou, and that's going to work great for you. What I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to add a little bit of extra bulk or a little bit of extra cover to this skirt. So I'm going to take this out, I'm going to lay this back, and this is the cream that we're going to have going into our back hook. I'm going to lay that in, and it's going just barely past our thread wraps on the back hook. Just enough to give us a cover, but not too bulky to where it's going to overtake or interfere with any material, or it's not going to interfere with our articulation. Now you can see where I stopped at, well, not so much because I was rambling on about something different, but I stopped at right where I folded my wire over. So as I come through here, I'm going to have almost a seamless transition especially once I get that skirt on the opposite side. Same thing, I'm going to take the same amount on the opposite side of that Marabou plume, bust those off right, well, somewhat even. I'm going to try and clean that up a little bit. I got one or two that are a little long. There we go. Now when I set these in, I'm not setting them directly on the side. I'm kind of canting it a little bit to the top. So I'm going to have good side coverage, but I'm also getting good coverage on the top as well. And then once again, going right to where I doubled my wire over. And then just trim this off. There we go. Now we have a nice seamless transition on that body section right there. There's no bumps, there's no gaps or anything. You can see we have a nice clean section to work with. And these materials, or these fibers right here, the majority of them are sitting over the top. You can see, well, this back one's a little wet still, but it's going to give you a good cover on the top and then minimal coverage on the sides. So like I was saying before, as you're transitioning from the tail to the front overwings, you're going to get more bulk as you go. I don't know if I like this feather too much. I'm going to set it on here and see what I think of it. I may wind up picking a different one. Marabou in my mouth. Yeah, it looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Once again, I'm taking this quarter to a halfway back that overwing. I just want to get 1-2 wraps nice and secure, and then really pull down on these. And now with this top one, I'm going to work it all the way to the front to keep that nice taper that we're after on the body. I'm going to work it right to that drop off to where I bent the hook or bent the wire backwards, and I still have my reference point in place and a clean body section right here that's not going to be, I'm not going to have to work extra with my dubbing to keep everything nice and even. So I'm going to tie the wire in all the way up front, work that all the way back to my tie-in point for the tail, and then same thing, just bring that back around, and then I'm going to trim this just shy of my tie-in point. There we go. Nice and clean. Just push that down a little bit. Again, with a dubbing loop for our UV, or for the ice dub, I should say. And then we'll get this in place. And tie that off. Take just, once again, with this ice dub, you don't need a ton of it. That's going to be a little bit too much right there. We're not going to need a ton of this, and it's going to be a little, it's just going to be a very subtle taper when we when we spin this in. So right there's what we have. Get that out of the way so we can see it. There's what we got. Just take and spin your tool, and then take a look at what you have. There was one section there that was a little bit bulkier than what I wanted it, so I'm just going to disperse that through, and then we're going to spin this around to create the body. There we go. You can see the nice clean taper that we have right here. Working through this, there's a couple of fibers right there, but we've got a nice clean taper throughout that. Now what we're going to do is go back to our hackle, and we're going to grab a piece that's a little bit bigger than the section that we used before. That would have been a good one, but it's a little stubby. It's a little stubby. Here we go. I like finding these ones that have the little bit of black in them right through here. It's got the black, and then it has, you know, your barred ginger throughout it. Completely up to you. I mean, if you want to go with something different, if you want to go with more of the barred ginger and less black, it's not really going to make a difference into how the fly fishes whatsoever. So back to this, we're going to find our tie-in point. Get that secure. And then we're going to wrap this, same thing with the package side going toward the front. We're going to set this in and just nice even wraps right to the back. That one got a little squirrely on me there, but I still like the way that it looks. Nice even wraps to the back. Get rid of that, and then we'll counter wrap. Make sure that my fingers aren't in the way. We'll counter wrap all the way up, and you can take that right to the eyes. Get rid of our wire, and then we'll get rid of our tag end on the hackle. There we go. Now, I have this right to the eyes on this back section. You can see what we're working with here. Our material's running almost directly up against these eyes, and it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. It's going to create a little bit of bulk, and this is where working with the right amount of material is going to help you in the long run, because it's not going to create a bunch of bulk right there, because we're still going to have to tie in our collar once we get our legs and 2 stacks of Marabou in there. So as little spread wraps as possible as it takes to secure things in place. I'm going to take one rubber leg here, and this is just a orange and pumpkin and yellow. I don't know why, I just like the way that this looks with the tan. So we're going to take this one wrap over the top, figure 8 this, and you can see I'm able to manipulate this right where I want it. My legs are hanging straight down. Go 1, 2, tighten that down, and that thread's going to wrap into the figure 8 that you used previously. Those legs are locked into place. Everything's nice and secure. I'm just going to take and get a quick trim on that. If I want to change it up later on, I can. That's going to wind up going back into just about where my tie-in point is for the tail. Now we're going to go back to our overwing. Same thing, we're going to go with a cream for the underneath side. Getting a little bit heavier with the material as we go. I'm going to wet that down. This one, just like the back overwing, is going to be slightly shorter than the toner that we're going to use. So 1, 2 wraps, nice and secure. Get a third in there. If you want, you can come forward a little bit just to keep it from rolling on you and to get a little bit more security in there. There we have a nice clean overwing, but like I said, it's not so long to where it's going to interfere with the color that we're trying to get for this mottled effect going through. It's the last overwing that we're using right here. A little bit more bulk than what we used on the previous ones. And once again, we're going quarter to halfway back our last tie-in point on the skirt. One loose wrap, get a second, secure this in place, just make sure that it didn't roll on you at all. Everything's looking pretty clean right there. As I bring that back, you're going to see when it's wet, it's going to fall right in line with that measurement that we want for the halfway, or quarter to halfway. Same thing, I'm just going to make a wrap in front here just to make sure that it's not going to roll on me, give me a little bit of extra security. Get that out of the way. And then I need to find something to hold all of this material back while we're working with the deer hair. Somewhere or another, I've got a straw sitting around, but I'll just cut another piece here. There we go. Now I just want to take this, put that straw over the top. I have all the material out of the way. I have a nice clean area to work with for the deer hair. The first thing that we're going to do on this is the collar section. And then this is just a natural primo strip. You want a nice thick collar on this. Even though it is a mini version of the dungeon, you still want to, I over exaggerate the collar, so I take more deer hair than what I think I'm going to need, because like I said, I want this to be a real thick collar on this fly. I don't know if this is going to be enough or not. I'll see once I have it stacked. I want a little bit more. This isn't the best deer hair. Some of these primo strips that you get are absolutely phenomenal. Some of the other ones they leave a lot to be desired. This is one of them. Still good hair, but just doesn't have all the qualities that you typically look for in this deer hair. So I got another section here that I think I'm going to like a little bit better. I'm going to take that, clean all of the fuzz and everything out. There's still a little bit more in there. That's better. Once again, throw that back in the stacker. And this is important when you're doing this. If you don't like the way that it looks, like I did on that one, I didn't like the way that it was setting, don't force it. Throw the stuff away, start over. There's no sense tying the entire fly and then getting to the head and not being happy with the way it looks. Make sure that we've got nice even tips through here. Clean out any of that junk. There we go. That looks pretty good right there. Now, the reference point that I use on this is I want the collar going back between the point of the hook and the barb. So if my tips are falling right along that line, I know that I'm in the ballpark for what I want on this. So then I'm going to take this section. I have my measurement lined up. I'm just going to take and cut that flush. And then this is going to be strictly a collar. I'm going to get that a little bit cleaner. Take and spin my thread to the right here. And then you can see I'm going directly behind these eyes. I want them directly behind. So there's 1, 2, and then a third. Typically on deer hair, I'll switch over to 200. I didn't on this one. I typically do, but I think I'm able to get away with this one the way that it sits right now. So now you can see you have that little caddis style head right there. What you can do is just take a couple of wraps through this and work it right through up to the front. Just kind of mat that down a little bit. Now if you look on the underneath side, and if you're really picky like somebody I know, you're going to see a little bit of white sitting right there. If you want to eliminate that, real quick way to do it is just take a quick, just a small pinch of deer hair. You can see this is all we're using. I mean, it's basically a stimulator wing, maybe even a little less than that. And then I'm just going to clean that up. Come through here, cut off the tips. And cut that off a little bit more actually. Center this up to where it's right underneath. Go 1 wrap around, and you're just going to stack this in the back. So 1 wrap, 2 wraps. My third, I'm just going to pull down, flare that hair out, and that's going to cover up that white section right there. So now I'm just going to advance my thread on through here, and I'm going to be on the front section, or I'm going to be in front of the eyes. So now you can see all this working space that I have. I've got from the eye of my hook to the actual eyes on the pattern, to the dumbbell eyes. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take 1 stack, I'm going to spin it right around there, I'm going to trim it, and then this fly's done. So with this, because I'm going to be spinning it, I'm going to exaggerate the amount of deer hair that I have on this. You're going to drop some. I'm going to take a little bit extra deer hair, probably a little bit more than what I used for the collar. I'm going to clean this out. And especially with this hair, it's not the best, like I was saying. There's the section that we got cleaned out. That's all the junk that we're getting rid of. And then once again, I'm going to grab this. I'm going to cut the tips off. Right like so. Dropped a little bit more hair there. And then I'm going to transfer this over to my other hand. I'm going to set this bundle to where it's right in the center. So I'm tying in the center section of that bundle on the center portion of the remaining working hook that I have left. And I'm going 1, 2, a third wrap, and then you'll see this just spin. There we go. And then if you want to, you can just work this right through here until you get to the eye. We've got a nice clean eye that we're going to work with. 1, 2. Clear all that stuff out and then make a whip finish right in front. Last thing we're going to do before this fly is done, I'm going to take this out of the vise. Out of the holder here. I'm going to comb through this deer hair, just standing everything up, getting everything nice and clean. Get that back out of the way. And then we're going to trim our deer hair. always start on the bottom on this one, so I flip it around, I find my eyes, and it's just a nice clean cut, nice flat cut right on the bottom. Get that stuff out of the way. Now, I don't want this deer hair underneath that I tied behind the eyes interfering with me being able to see the body. So what I do is I push that straw up against it, and you got to be careful here because it's a little bit shorter of a body that you're working with on these minis as opposed to the full size. Don't go nicking your fingers with the razor blade. But I just want that nice clean break back there so I'm able to see my hackle and the body as well. I can clean that up a little bit if needed later. So then, same thing, I'm just taking this and drawing it straight through. Probably be better if I do this, that way you can see it. Right flush with the eyes. Try not to nick your eyes because it'll wreck your blade in one pass and then you have to go get another one. Now, we're going to take this, spin it around, get the shape that you want with your razor blade. Probably not going to be able to show that. There we go. There's the shape that we want. And then I'll get my shoulder out of the way, center everything up, and then it's just one push straight through. And when I do this, I always aim my razor blade to the tips of my collar. That way, on my first pass, I'm not going to make this so tight, or I'm not going to take so much of it off that I'm going to ruin the head. You can see, I mean, it's an imperfect first cut by all means. It's just a mess right there. But now I have basically a path to work with. I can see all the imperfections, and I just want to continue back that path, clearing up all of the remaining fibers that are on there, and this blade's just about shot. I'm going to pull the collar out of the way, that way I can work with these right here. And this blade is shot. Let me get another one here. Alright, bringing that through, balancing. I have my hand resting, my left hand's resting on the vise. I'm balancing my right hand with my left. Everything's nice and firm, nice and secure, and I have good control over this razor blade, so I'm not going to go nicking up my collar or anything like that. Just going to get a couple of these stray hairs that are running back into the collar that I don't want. You can see I have the nice form. I'm starting to get the nice shape that I'm after. One side's a little heavier than the other, but we'll square that up here in a little bit. Before I continue with the razor blade, there's the work phone, I just bring this out of the vise. Let me make sure it's getting into focus there before I start cutting. Take this out of the vise, and then I'm cutting against the grain just to give me the overall shape that I want. And my fat fingers are in the way. Same thing, I'm going to flip this on the opposite side. I'm going to make the trim that I want right here. Get that pretty close. And I'm out of the frame again, I'm out of focus. Trying to concentrate on two things at once typically doesn't work out well for me. But there you can see we have pretty close to the shape that I want. Like I said, I'm a little heavier on this right side than I am the left. We'll get that fixed here momentarily with the razor blade. So now all I'm going to do is I have a couple stray fibers that I'm after. I'm just going to take and feather this through, getting rid of these fibers. And if this were a pattern that I was going to be fishing, I'm not going to lie, I would be just as detailed. But it doesn't really matter if you have all these fibers out or not, because the second this thing gets in the water, the hair gets wet, it doesn't look the way that it does on the vise. So, but I do get just as picky when I'm tying for ones that I'm going to be actually fishing and that aren't going to be on camera. I'm just as picky. Bring these right through here. Before I make any more final cuts here, I want to make sure that I'm able to see my eyes. So I'm going to trim around these a little bit. Get the eyes visible. There's one hair that I don't like right there. A couple down through there as well. On the opposite side, make sure we got the eyes visible. We're just going to cut a little bit of this out. There we go. Things are starting to take shape here. We're just about finished on this trim. Get that out of the way. Now, I want this a little bit more exaggerated on the front. It's a little bit bulky right there, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit, try not to block the camera and still make a good cut. I want to bring that, I want to round that just a little bit more, so I'm going to take just a fine trim right through there. And this is tough with the vise going a little bit away from me, but that's as aggressive as I'm going to get on this. I'll finish it. I'll clean it up the rest of the way when I can lean over the vise and get everything how I want it. I lied. There's a section right there that I just wasn't able to get, and I know I'm blocking the back view. Alright, I'm going to stop myself before I ruin the damn thing. But now we're going to pull this straw off. We're going to be able to pull these fibers down. We got our hackle coming through. We're able to see our body down through here. I got a little bit carried away with that back section. I probably could have taken a little bit fewer fibers on that bottom, but we're able to see everything that we're after on the underneath side, and then our hackles on the top are running straight back, or our Marabou on the top is running straight back. Once that gets wet, it's just going to have a nice continuous mottled look to the back. You have the nice half moon for the collar, and then the finished deer hair head. Almost finished. But there it is. There's Kelly Galloup's mini dungeon, minus a couple of hairs that I'm going to trim. I just can't help myself. Can't help myself. There we go. Minus a couple more hairs that I'm going to trim once the cameras are off, but you've watched me limp through that enough. So there is Kelly Galloup's mini dungeon. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them with me. Thanks as always for watching. We'll catch you next Wednesday.